All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos here, and we focus on great theories of everything, ancient and modern, help you to round out your holistic worldview or awakened 5D consciousness, help you out with your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. Red pill the crap out of you if necessary. And we usually focus on obscure sources that you probably haven't heard of before. And today is the 63rd video that we've done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. Important to mention that Buddhism is called a religion, but I certainly don't see it that way. Could be maybe a label, but ultimately when you break it down, it is a science or a technology or a process or a method of meditation. Two methods of meditation: concentration meditation, which is the focus on an object in your meditation, and insight meditation, which is opening up to your six sense doors, your five senses, and your mental impressions, and the investigation of those for the three characteristics of impermanence, dissatisfactoriness or suffering, and no self. So all your mental impressions, all your physical impressions are impermanent, dissatisfactory, and they are not you. And as you grasp that faster and faster, you move along the stages of insight. Now, there is also a third aspect of Buddhism, which is training in morality. Again, can be definitely, separated from any type of religious context. Many pagan philosophies and atheistic philosophies even contain morality training. Just trying to be a good person. And okay, we are in the middle of looking at, I believe this is chapter 37 or 8, and it's on many of the models of awakening that have been proffered by the Buddhists over the years, over the 2,500 years, and kind of critiquing them, which he likes better than others. And we're in the middle of looking at the emotional model, which is basically like, if you become enlightened, then you're not subject to emotional. There can be various gradations of it. Some schools will say you don't have any emotions, and some schools will say you don't have any negative emotions. Some schools might just say that you have control over your emotions. And so we're kind of in the middle of that. So let's start right here and see where we end up. There are some benefits to identifying and then skillfully moderating the inner processes and external manifestations of negative emotions, while simultaneously being conscious and accepting of the fact that difficult emotions occur. Morality training is vast and contains many foundational practices, forming a skillful, albeit incomplete, solution to how to deal optimally with our unskillful emotional aspects. For example, in my work as a physician, I do my best to maintain professionalism and kindness in the face of various suffering patients and their myriad reactions, such as kicking, hitting, screaming at, and spitting on their care providers, to help diffuse situations and maintain an atmosphere that is more conducive to good patient care and healing for all involved. However, if we repress our various emotional reactions to suffering while simultaneously pretending that they can't or don't occur within us, usually based on some so-called spiritual model that tells us they're verboten. This sort of cultivated denial can also produce huge shadow sides and a lot of unconscious, more extremely reactive, neurotic, and even violent behavior. A tour of basically any spiritual community on the planet, or hospital for that matter, will reveal this in staggering abundance. Dissociation and passive aggression are classic manifestations of this sort of denial and refusal to see our emotions for what they are. Our far more practical approach is to accept that we are human, try to be decent in a normal, down-to-earth sort of way, rather than in a grandiose, non-self-conscious, spiritual way, and assume that reducing and eliminating the illusion of the dualistic split is possible through doing basic insight practices. Reducing the sense of a split can provide more clarity, allowing us to be the human beings we are with more balance and less reactivity in the face of that humanity. In fact, it is being clearer and more aware of exactly what our emotions are and how and when they arise that makes it easier to come up with wiser responses to them. As we habitually bring attention to the whole range of human experience, that attention can transform aspects of what happens in our experience and in our interactions with others. That said, all living examples whom I have encountered fail to live up to the highest ideals of the standard emotional models that promise the elimination of either all negative or all destructive emotions, or all emotions entirely in some way. I know a few people who claim to have eliminated all emotions only to realize later that they were totally wrong, sometimes with extremely unfortunate consequences. I know a few people who claim to have eliminated all emotions and yet externally seem to be totally emotional, including demonstrating what looks exactly like emotions that would often be considered bad by the standard models. That they claim to be unable to perceive this seems more like denial than realization to me. Is it possible, as is sometimes argued, that people will for all the world appear to have emotions externally and yet not have any internally? While there is an outside chance that this may have occurred in someone, I truly believe it is just another form of hyper-sophisticated, spiritually induced blindness and rationalization, common things being common as they are, and there is no reason this couldn't be blended with genuine insights, as most of the people I know who claim this sort of thing have spent a lot of time practicing. Okay, this section is called the Theravada four-path model. The root of the complexity in standard Buddhism comes to us from the Theravada four-path model. This is the original model presented in the Pali Canon and the oldest Buddhist model we have to work with. All the subsequent schools react to it in their own way, but are still influenced by it, even if they say they are not. So you need to know it to understand the debate. The problems began long before the Buddha in the various ancient traditions that would even eventually and collectively be referred to as Hinduism, which had a huge impact on Buddhism, despite what some naive Buddhists will tell you, and probably long before that. But this is as good a place to start as any. I shouldn't blame ancient India and Nepal for what is really a perennial human wish. Let's face it, we all want emotional perfection, as a large chunk of the pain felt in our lives relates to our emotions causing trouble. I propose that not perceiving our emotions clearly is a far greater problem than the emotions themselves, but I seem to be in the minority in this regard. As I stated in the chapter, Harnessing the Energy of the Defilements, there is a lot to be said for the skillful aspects of what we usually consider negative emotions. It is important to realize that empty compassion drives all our emotions, whether filtered through the illusion of duality or otherwise. Really, you might reasonably reply, even the heinous acts of terrorists and telemarketers? Really, these are in some twisted way resulting from empty compassion? To which I reply, yes. Does that make our actions ethical? Often not, obviously, though ethics is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. And there is the rub that makes a bare bodkin of us all, to bastardize Mark Twain's bastardization of Hamlet, and of course, meaning no offense to those whose parents weren't married at the time of their conception. The Theravada four-path model has 4 stages of awakening, namely, first path, stream enterer, or in Pali, Sotapanna. Second path, once returner, or Sakodagami. Third path, non-returner, or Anagami. And finally, fourth path, which gets translated in various ways in various sources, with some including perfected person, holy one, saint, or conqueror, one who has conquered the defilements that prevented the realization of nirvana, or arahant, pick your favorite spelling, but I will use arahant, realizing that I used arahat in the previous version. The terms once returner and non-returner have to do with issues relating to the dogma that those who have attained to second path cannot be reborn more than once before attaining arhantship. Okay. And certainly not in the lower realms. Says hungry ghost realms, animal realms, see the samsara. Wikipedia article section on realms of rebirth and or Chogyam Trungpa's transcending madness for a discussion of the 6 realms. And that, I think those are from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, also talks about these. But anyway, and that those who have attained to third path, if they do not attain to arhantship in this lifetime, will at worst be born in a heavenly realm where the conditions are optimal for achieving awakening. However, the core of the Theravada four-path model is the dogma that enlightenment involves progressively eliminating the 10 defilements, also often called the 10 fetters. And so this is sometimes called the 10-fetter model. In this model, stream entry eliminates the belief. Stream entry eliminates the first 3 defilements, which are 1, skeptical doubt, 2, attachment to rites and rituals, And 3, personality belief, meaning belief in a separate, independently existing self. Second path attenuates the 4th and 5th defilements, usually translated as 4, greed, and 5, hatred, or more technically, attraction and aversion to everything that is not a jhanic state. Third path is said to eliminate those same 4th and 5th defilements, however translated. 4th path, that of arhantship, eliminates the remaining 5 defilements. 6, attachment to formed jhanas, the first 4. 7, attachment to the formless realms, the second 4 jhanas. 8, restlessness and worry. 9, conceit. And 10, the last veil of unknowing. It is important to note that arhants who are said to have eliminated conceit can appear to us as arrogant and conceited, as well as restless or worried, etc. That there is no fundamental suffering in them while this is occurring is an utterly separate issue. That said, conceit in the conventional sense and the rest of life can cause all sorts of conventional suffering for arhants, just as it can for everyone else. While discussing conceit, perhaps I should take on the subject of the word ego in a more comprehensive way than I have done so far. Now, while we're getting into this, just keep in mind that Ingram is presenting this information, but he's going to critique it at a certain point. This is not what he believes, or at least, he may believe in certain parts of it. Okay, the pop psychology meaning of the word ego is something like arrogance, self-absorption, pride, narcissism, conceit in the conventional sense, and a failure to consider the feelings, rights, needs, and or existence of others. This is also the definition that is most commonly behind such mainstream Buddhist statements such as that action or statement had a lot of ego in it. I think that this definition of ego can sometimes be slightly useful for training in morality if we are very kind to ourselves and those around us, but often it seems to me to be pop spirituality turned into a weapon and a form of denial of someone else's difficulties, feelings, and suffering. Worse, people often take this definition, mix it in with their own insecurities and unfortunate fear of existing or asserting themselves in the conventional sense, and then take this neurotic mélange and use it to continue to flog themselves and those around them. Please don't do this. It is misguided and will not help you or anyone. This pop psychology definition of ego also has nothing to do with the self, in quotes, that is being seen through in the quest for awakening in the formal sense. So don't bring it to mind when you read this chapter except to dismiss it. Another definition of ego is the formal psychological one put forward by Freud. In this definition, ego is the moderator between the internalized parents or police of the superego and the id's primal drives, those largely involving survival and reproduction. In this sense, ego is extremely important and should be cultivated consciously. This definition has to do with the more formal psychological concept of ego strength, a strength that is very positive and necessary for the deep and often difficult personal growth that we all want for ourselves. One of the explicit requirements for entering intensive psychoanalysis and intensive meditation, for that matter, is highly developed ego strength, the ability to face our reality and dark stuff without completely freaking out. Thus, eliminating this form of ego would be a disaster. For reasons completely beyond me, the word ego is also used in a high mystical sense to describe the elimination of the experiential illusion of there being a special reference point as described in the section on no self in the chapter The Three Characteristics. One who had eliminated this form of ego, which is in this case a useless illusion, might describe their experience in this way. Quote, "In this full field of experience or manifestation, there seems to be no special or permanent spot that is observing, controlling, separated from, or subject to any other point or aspect of the rest of this causal field of experience or manifestation." End quote. This is the experience and realization of the Arahant. Notice that this use of the term ego seems to have nothing whatsoever to do with the other usages of the term. This is exactly the point, and so I strongly advocate never using the word ego to substitute for self as understood in the context of describing realization of no self. Those who do otherwise continue to cause an astounding amount of unrealistic, disempowering, and life-denying thinking in mainstream Buddhists. It is my sincere wish that the misuse of the word ego and the associated negative side effects stop immediately and forever. Since the Theravada four-path model explicitly states that realization is mostly about eliminating greed, hatred, restlessness, worry, etc., this suggests a limited emotional range model and deserves some serious skepticism. In fact, this is a good time to go into what I love and despise about the Theravada. I absolutely love its emphasis on the three characteristics, love the astounding power of its techniques, and am grateful beyond words for the maps it provided me with for the territory before Second Path, however incomplete and idealized. I am profoundly grateful at times to the point of tears, and I mean that, for the monasteries I got to sit in, for its preservation of what has been true and useful in Buddhism for over 2,500 years, and for the chance to have sat with real awakened teachers. And yet, its maps of enlightenment still contain a hefty helping of scary market-driven propaganda and so much garbage that is life-denying, dangerously out of touch with what happens, and an impediment to practice for millions of people. That the enlightened lineage holders of the modern Theravada and their ex-monk and ex-nun Western counterparts don't have the guts to stand up and say, "We are deeply sorry that for 2,500 years many of our predecessors perpetuated this craziness to put food in their bowls and fool ignorant peasants so that they might be supported in their other useful work, and we vow to do better," is a crying shame. The huge question is, how many of the monastics are really practicing deeply, really giving attainment of actual realization everything they have, rather than being monastics for worldly reasons, that while potentially of benefit to them and their supporters, lack the key focus for which the Buddha founded the order. Due to this lack of realization found in so many monastics, they are chained to the texts, myths, and the ancient exaggerations, as well as the culture, seemingly doomed to indoctrinate and brainwash generation after generation of monks and nuns, practitioners, and devoted followers with their delicious poison. however benevolently intended. What a freakish paradox that the meditative techniques and technologies that I consider among the most powerful and direct ever developed should come from a tradition where models of awakening contain some of the worst myths of them all. I have sat with numerous arhants who were monks or former monks who just couldn't seem to overcome their indoctrination, and so when giving Dharma talks would occasionally mix in the junk with the gold, when it was obvious they knew better from their own direct experience. Here's an example from one of my favorite realized Arhat teachers who taught me a ton and to whom I am extremely grateful. Someone asked him, "Are you suffering?" He answered, referring to himself, "This is not suffering." Except that I was aware of the details of this teacher's life, and this teacher's life involved all sorts of real, ordinary, straightforward misery and problems, the sort of suffering that is listed by the Buddha as being an integral part of the suffering of having been born into this life. I have at times dreamed that all the great realized teachers from all the Buddhist practice lineages would get together, come up with a plan to jointly get themselves out of the trap, and in a big formal ceremony present the truth as a new beginning, like a mass intervention, like a family gathering around an alcoholic to try to force them to reform their ways. None of them on their own seem to be fully able to take the heat, as each one that steps out of line in a direct fashion tends to get blasted, squashed, silenced, shunned, etc. Though there are a few gentle and subtle exceptions, such as Jack Kornfield's After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. Thus, I think, that's a book. Thus, I think they should all try to do it together with Zen masters, rishis, lamas, rinpoches, tulkus, sayadaws, ajahns, and their Western counterparts, all sitting side by side around a large table saying, "Enough is enough. We are declaring a new era of honest, open, realistic, relevant Dharma teaching, free from finely honed sectarian fighting, free from mythic and archaic models of awakening, and free from denial of humanity." Enough of my ranting, and back to the models. I have no significant problems with most of the traditional descriptions of stream entry. It does make people realize somewhat that rites and rituals are not the primary reason that they got enlightened. Though I know practitioners who awakened with the significant help of techniques involving various rituals in their practice, and why not? It should also be noted that there are rituals and there are rituals. Some rituals involve high degrees of concentration, altered states of consciousness, and profound investigation, elements that can be conducive to deep insights. Stream entry does counter, in some semi-intellectual way, the sense that there is a permanent, separate self, though exactly how meditators know this is much more mysterious than at the higher stages of awakening, and the degree to which this is noticed varies depending on the practitioner. Regardless of the degree to which they notice it, it beats any understanding of this that is pre-stream entry. However, beware the pernicious descriptive fallacy that states that all stream enterers will describe their reality and realizations exactly as we imagine they should, and this fits automatically, and thus automatically state that they are totally free of so-called personality belief. Further, they know that awakening is possible and can be done in this lifetime, assuming they know they are awakened in the first place, which strangely not all awakened beings do. Those persons that encounter this understanding outside of established traditions may fail to recognize that what they have understood is called awakening, among other names. Regardless, stream entry is metaphorically understood as the opening of the Dharma eye, as contrasted with the wisdom eye of arhatship. These are simply poetic metaphors for some aspects of clearly perceiving things and don't refer to anything beyond those attainments themselves. I hesitate even to mention those terms, as I get all sorts of totally strange questions about them, as if they are some bizarre psychic or anatomic phenomena. They are poetic metaphors, not some extra eye on your forehead a la Lobsang Rampa. My real problem with the Theravada four-path model comes as soon as it starts talking about second path. That is, the attenuation of greed and hatred or attraction and aversion, and by the time it promises eliminating these in their ordinary forms, as they say occurs in third path. I think that a serious critique of their language and dogma is called for. Those in more explicitly dogmatic traditional Theravada circles may notice the third path glass ceiling they find after second path, meaning that they can find lots of examples of people who are second path by their definitions, but then suddenly there is a total disconnect in which people continue to progress and practice, go through cycles, and gain all sorts of additional insights into the basics of reality, but still have the emotions that the dogma said should be eliminated by third path. It is a problem. They still might get angry. They still might get sexually aroused. They still might feel and do all sorts of things that those who are anagamis are not supposed to be able to feel and do. Thus, if you try to find living examples of those who are out past second path by the standard models, people suddenly get vague and the talk either quiets down or becomes full of zealous bluster and pontification. Hints are put out there that so-and-so might be third or fourth path, but then everyone is watching them to see if they do things that might imply they still have emotions related in any way to greed and hatred. In this way, the whole topic gets covered